The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain, where the land was as unforgiving as the hearts of men who roamed it. In this desolate stretch of the American West, a solitary figure stood watch over a patch of hard-earned earth, a rancher named Caleb Reed, whose only company was the wind whispering through the sagebrush and the crows cawing overhead. Caleb was a man marked by the weight of loss, a reclusive soul who had buried his dreams beneath the ash of a past tragedy, finding solace only in the rhythm of his labor. It was in those quiet moments of twilight that the world seemed to pause, allowing memories to flood back like a runaway river. He could still hear the laughter of his wife, the soft echoes of their children's voices, now forever silenced by fate's cruel hand. Each day was a struggle against the ghosts that haunted him, yet he remained steadfast, bound by principles forged in the fires of hardship. He believed in hard work, in the sanctity of life, and in protecting what little he had left. But the landscape, like the man himself, was hardened and raw, revealing little mercy to those who wandered too far or too carelessly. Then, just as the horizon swallowed the last remnants of sunlight, the peace of the evening was shattered by a sound that brought Caleb back to the present. It was the frantic rustle of movement, something foreign intruding upon his solitude. He stepped away from the wooden porch of his modest cabin, his heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The shadows danced erratically, revealing not a beast of the night but two figures, thin and weary, stumbling toward him with desperation painted across their faces. They were young, no more than teenagers, their features revealing the markings of a people long oppressed by the greed of others. The girl, a mere wisp of a thing, clutched her side, where blood seeped through her fingers, staining her once vibrant dress. The boy, tall and wiry, glanced over his shoulder as if expecting the devil himself to emerge from the dark. The sight of them ignited a fierce instinct within Caleb, a raw and primal need to protect. But in that instant, another voice crept into his mind, one that echoed the prejudices of the times. The very land he toiled over had been won by the force of conquest, and now he stood on the cusp of a decision that could shatter the fragile peace he had carved for himself. As they approached, the girl stumbled and fell to her knees, her eyes wide with fear and pain. The boy rushed to her side, panic rising in his throat like a wildfire. "Please, sir," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "We need help. She's hurt. The soldiers, they came for us. We fled." Caleb felt the tension in the air, thick as smoke. He could sense the danger surrounding them, the weight of history pressing down like a boulder. He had heard the stories of the soldiers who hunted the native tribes, men who took what they wanted and left nothing but sorrow in their wake. He knew the risks of harboring them, of defying the very fabric of the society that had taught him to look the other way, to turn his back on the suffering of others. But as he gazed into the girl's eyes, he saw not just fear, but the flicker of a spirit that refused to be extinguished. A part of him, buried deep under years of solitude, cried out against the injustice. The cowboy code, the one that had been passed down through generations, demanded honor, demanded courage. And while he had spent years hiding from the past, the call to act was undeniable. "Come inside," Caleb said, his voice gruff but firm. "We'll tend to your wounds." He ushered them into his home, the flickering light of the oil lamp casting warm shadows across the rough-hewn walls. The girl slumped against the table, gasping for breath as Caleb fetched a clean cloth and warm water. The boy hovered nearby, eyes darting to the door, ever watchful for the soldiers who might come looking for them. As he worked, Caleb felt the weight of his decision. Here he was, a man forged by loss, now faced with the chance to save another's life. But at what cost? The townsfolk had always whispered about the native tribes, spreading tales of savagery and conflict. Yet in that moment, as he wrapped the bandage around the girl's wound, he felt an undeniable connection, an echo of his own pain reflected in their eyes. "Thank you," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Hours passed, the night deepening like a thick blanket. The girl's breathing steadied, and for the first time, Caleb felt a flicker of hope. But the quiet was deceptive, and the shadows outside loomed larger with every passing minute. Just as Caleb thought they might find respite, the ground trembled under the weight of approaching hooves. Heart pounding, he stepped out onto the porch, his pulse racing. The silhouettes of men on horseback emerged from the darkness, the glint of badges shining ominously in the moonlight. It was a posse, a corrupt lawman and his hired guns, looking for blood, looking for vengeance. The air thickened with tension as Caleb realized the true stakes of his choice. They wouldn't just come for the girl and the boy. They'd come for him too, an accomplice in their eyes, a target for his kindness. "Get inside," he barked, the gravity of the moment crystallizing in his mind. Now, as the young ones scurried back into the safety of the cabin, Caleb steeled himself, the weight of his principles crashing down like thunder. He was at a crossroads, one path leading to safety, the other into the heart of danger, where his choices would define not just his fate, but that of those he had sworn to protect. The Cowboy Code had never asked for easy choices, and in that moment, Caleb Reed knew he had to stand firm against the tide of darkness. For his last meal that night would not be one of solitude. It would be a testament to defiance, a meal shared with those who had come seeking refuge in a world built on division. And as the soldiers drew near, Caleb prepared for a confrontation that would change the course of his life forever. The sun would rise again, but what would it bring? The night deepened around Caleb, the shadows of the trees stretching long like the ghosts of those who had lived and died on this land. The crackle of the fire flickered against the cold, a meager warmth in a world that felt increasingly hostile. He could hear the whispers of the young ones, their voices trembling with fear. But beneath that fear lay a thread of hope, hope that had driven them to his door, hope that he would not betray. As he sat in the dim light, he couldn't shake the memories of his own past, the faces of loved ones lost to the cruelty of a world that valued strength over compassion. He had once worn a badge, a symbol of law and order, but the weight of that symbol had grown unbearable, a chain that bound him to the corruption he now detested. The soldiers approaching were not bringers of justice. They were harbingers of destruction, eager to exploit the plight of the vulnerable for their own gain. With each passing hour, the air grew heavier, the anticipation of violence palpable. Caleb could hear the distant clattering of horse hooves, the low murmur of voices drawn by the promise of confrontation. They were men whose hearts had been hardened by greed, men who saw the Native American children as nothing more than a means to an end. He felt a surge of anger, not just for the soldiers, but for a system that allowed such exploitation to thrive. Suddenly the door creaked open, and the girl stepped out, her wide eyes searching for reassurance. She was but a child, perhaps no more than 15, yet the weight of the world rested upon her shoulders. "Caleb," she whispered, "they're coming for us. What will we do?" He met her gaze, steeling his resolve. "We will face them together," he replied, though doubt gnawed at the edges of his confidence. "You and your brother are safe here for now. I won't let them take you." But as the night wore on, Caleb knew that words alone would not be enough. He had to outsmart them, to turn the tables on the corrupt men who believed they held all the power. The moment they stepped foot on his land, he would need to act. By dawn, he gathered his wits, laying plans with quiet determination. He would confront the soldiers not with a gun drawn, but with the truth, armed with knowledge he had gleaned over years of living in the shadows. The rumors of corruption and greed ran deeper than the river nearby, and he had a mind to use them to his advantage. As the first light of day began to pierce the horizon, Caleb made his way to the small stash of supplies he had kept hidden, dry goods, blankets, even a few old rifles left from better days. He knew he wouldn't be able to protect them forever, but perhaps he could buy enough time for the truth to emerge. When the soldiers finally arrived, they were led by a man named Hawthorne, a notorious figure whose reputation for ruthlessness was known far and wide. With a swagger that spoke of entitlement, he dismounted and strode toward the cabin, flanked by his men who eyed Caleb with suspicion and contempt. "Reed," Hawthorne called out, a smirk on his lips. "You've got something that belongs to us. Hand over the children and we might let you keep your life." Caleb stepped forward, heart pounding in his chest, the urge to back down battling against his desire to stand firm. "They're not property, Hawthorne. They're human beings and I won't let you take them." Hawthorne laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "You think you can protect them? Out here, kindness gets you killed. We both know how this ends." But Caleb had one last card to play, a revelation that could change everything. "You don't know who they are, do you? They're not just children. They're part of a tribe that's been wronged for generations, and I have evidence that links you to the injustices done to them. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Hawthorne, and it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out." The smirk faltered for a brief moment, uncertainty flashing across Hawthorne's face. Caleb knew he had struck a nerve. The balance of power was shifting, and in that tense moment he saw the potential for an unexpected alliance, one that could rally others to their cause. As dawn broke fully, illuminating the land around them, Caleb felt the weight of history bearing down on him. He had made his choice, and now he would see it through, not with bullets and blood, but with the strength of his convictions. The truth was a weapon of its own, and he would wield it with everything he had. Caleb stood firm, feeling the earth beneath his boots, the weight of his ancestors pressing on his shoulders. The sun rose steadily, casting long shadows over the land, illuminating the path ahead. He could sense the moment shifting, the air charged with potential. Hawthorne's confidence was starting to crack, like ice beneath the weight of a heavy load. "Evidence, you say? What do you think that'll do against the law? You and your little friends are nothing but a nuisance, and the law's on my side." Caleb's eyes narrowed, determination flooding his veins. The law's been twisted to serve men like you, Hawthorne. But the truth doesn't need the law. It needs a voice. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words and buried histories. The Native Americans, still hidden from Hawthorne's view, were the real heart of this struggle. Caleb could feel their hope flickering like a flame, the kind that refused to be snuffed out easily. "I'll gather the tribe," he declared, his voice steady, unwavering. "They deserve a chance to speak for themselves, to reclaim their land and their story. You may have power, Hawthorne, but the truth will unravel your lies." Hawthorne's face twisted in anger, the realization of impending reckoning dawning upon him. "You think you can just waltz in there and stir them up? You'll bring down their wrath upon yourself." Caleb stepped closer, the tension crackling between them. "Let them come. They have every right to stand up for what's theirs. You can't keep them quiet forever." With a snarl, Hawthorne turned, his silhouette dark against the rising sun. "You'll regret this, Caleb. I promise you that. I'll make sure everyone knows what you're doing here." Caleb watched as Hawthorne stormed off, the dust swirling in his wake. In that moment, he felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. He had ignited a fire, one that could burn brightly or consume everything in its path. As the day wore on, Caleb made his way back to the small camp he had set up for the vulnerable ones. They needed to know the stakes, to understand the world they were entering. He found them gathered around a small fire, their expressions a blend of worry and resolve. "Listen," he began, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "Hawthorne's not just a man, he's a system built on exploitation. But we have something he doesn't. The truth. I need your voices, your stories, to shine a light on what he's done." The young ones exchanged glances, uncertainty clouding their features. Finally, the wounded teen spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they don't believe us?" Caleb knelt beside her, the warmth of the fire flickering between them. "They will if we stand together. You are not alone in this fight. Your tribe has a story that deserves to be heard." The group rallied, their spirits lifting as they began to share their histories, the injustices etched into their lives, the land that belonged to their ancestors. Caleb listened intently, knowing that these stories would be the foundation of their stand against Hawthorne's tyranny. As the sun dipped low in the sky, Caleb felt the weight of their combined resolve, a tapestry woven from threads of pain and hope. He had gathered more than just allies. He had forged a community bound by a shared purpose. The next morning they would make their voices heard. The truth would rise like the sun, casting light on the shadows that had lingered for too long. Caleb knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of hope within him, a belief that they could overcome the darkness together. As dawn broke over the rugged landscape, casting a harsh light on the still sleeping world, Caleb felt the tension in the air. The stories shared around the fire had ignited something deep within him, a fire of defiance against the oppressive weight of injustice. But even as hope flickered in his heart, he knew the shadow of Hawthorne loomed ever closer. Without warning, the sound of galloping hooves shattered the early morning silence, the thundering beat echoing like a war drum. Caleb stepped outside, his instincts sharpening as he spotted the dust cloud on the horizon. The sight of Hawthorne and his men approaching sent a chill through him, a reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond the fragile peace he had fought to build. Hawthorne, a man draped in arrogance and greed, dismounted with a swagger that belied the menace behind his eyes. "Well, well, Caleb," he sneered, tipping his hat back with a flourish. "Looks like you've taken up with a pack of strays. Thought you were better than that." Caleb stood firm, his jaw clenched, ready to defend the vulnerable souls who had sought refuge under his roof. "These people have suffered enough at your hands, Hawthorne. I won't let you bully them any longer." Hawthorne laughed, a sound like gravel scraping against steel. "You think you can protect them? You're a relic of a bygone age, a man clinging to old principles in a world that has moved on. I run this territory, and I decide who thrives and who doesn't." Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. One of the Native Americans, the wounded teen from the night before, stepped forward, her eyes fierce with determination. "You think we are afraid of you, Hawthorne. Our stories are more powerful than your lies. You've twisted the truth for too long." The smirk on Hawthorne's face faltered for the briefest moment, confusion flickering in his eyes as if the foundations of his dominance were beginning to crack. He regained his composure quickly, but Caleb sensed a change in the air, a crackle of possibility. Then, like a thunderclap, the truth broke loose. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she continued, her voice strong. "We are not just victims, we are the bearers of knowledge that could destroy your empire." Caleb's heart raced as he watched the exchange unfold. He turned to the girl, urging her on with his gaze. "What do you mean?" With a deep breath, she stepped closer, her voice steady now. "Hawthorne's conspiracy runs deeper than you know. We have evidence, documents that prove he has been illegally seizing our lands, manipulating the law for his gain. He fears us because we know the truth." Hawthorne's expression shifted, rage surging through him like wildfire. "You think you can outsmart me? You think I will let you walk away with that knowledge? You're playing a dangerous game, little girl." Caleb took a step forward, unwavering in the face of the corrupt man's fury. "It's not just a game anymore, Hawthorne. The people you've oppressed are standing up. You will not silence us." The tension escalated, and for a moment it felt like the very air around them was charged with the weight of history, a culmination of struggles fought and lost, now on the cusp of a reckoning. Caleb realized that this was more than just a confrontation. It was a turning point, a moment that would either bind them together or shatter them completely. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the weight of their truths hung heavy in the balance. The stakes had changed, and for the first time, Caleb felt the tide of fortune shift. The fight would not just be for survival, it would be for justice, for the voices that had been silenced for far too long. Hawthorne's lips curled into a sneer, and he leaned closer, his eyes narrowing like a predator sizing up its prey. "Justice? You think you can find justice in a world built on lies and blood? The law is mine to wield, and I will crush anyone who dares oppose me." Caleb held his ground, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath his boots, the heartbeat of a land that had seen too much suffering. "The law was never meant to serve men like you. You twist it to your advantage, but the truth has a way of surfacing, Hawthorne. It'll find you." Beside him, the young woman, Tala, stood tall, her spirit unyielding despite the weight of their circumstances. "We are not afraid of you, Hawthorne. Our people have endured worse, and we still rise. Together, we can expose your lies." The corrupt man laughed, a sound devoid of warmth echoing across the desolate expanse. "Rise? You think the people will stand with you? They're afraid of the very shadows you dwell in. You think they'll risk their lives for a handful of broken promises?" Caleb exchanged a quick glance with Tala, a silent understanding between them. They had to rally the community, to break through the walls of fear Hawthorne had built. "Fear can be shattered, Hawthorne. You forget. There are still those who believe in something greater than your tyranny." As the sun reached its zenith, casting long shadows across the parched ground, a distant sound of hoofbeats echoed in the air. Caleb's heart raced as he realized it could be their chance. "We'll gather the people, expose your corruption. You won't silence us." Hawthorne's bravado faltered for just a moment, revealing the glimmer of concern in his eyes. "You think they'll follow you? You'll lead them to their deaths." But before Caleb could respond, the approaching riders came into view, local ranchers, many of whom had suffered under Hawthorne's oppressive schemes. They were weary, but they held a flicker of hope, a spark ignited by Caleb's defiance. The confrontation hung heavy in the air, and Caleb stepped toward the gathering crowd, raising his voice. "Friends, this is our moment. We cannot let fear hold us any longer. Hawthorne has manipulated us for too long. We stand on the brink of a new dawn, one where we can reclaim what is ours." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some faces showing doubt, others determination. Hawthorne, sensing the shift, scoffed. "You think they'll rally behind a dream? You're nothing but a fool, Caleb." But Caleb pressed on. "What's a dream, if not the first step toward reality? Together, we'll shine the light of truth into the darkness he thrives in." As Caleb spoke, he felt the weight of history behind him, the struggles of the generations that had come before. He saw in their eyes the pain and anger, but also the longing for justice, for belonging. Hawthorne's eyes darted back and forth, assessing the crowd, his facade cracking. "You will regret this. I won't let you take what's mine." Just then, a voice from the crowd cut through the tension, an elder from the community. "We've been living in his shadow too long. It's time to take back our stories." Caleb could see it then, the tide turning. The crowd began to shift, gathering closer, emboldened by the elder's words. It was a moment of awakening, and with it the realization that they were no longer just individuals, but a community ready to reclaim their dignity. But as hope began to blossom, Caleb felt the darkness lurking in the corners of the gathering, an unmistakable sense of danger that came with Hawthorne's desperation. The real battle was yet to come, and the knowledge that they were about to confront not just a man, but an entire system of corruption weighed heavily on him. "Tonight we will meet to discuss our next steps," he declared, turning to the crowd, his voice steady. "We must be ready. He will not take this lightly." And as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a fiery glow across the land, Caleb knew that the confrontation was inevitable, but so was the chance for redemption. They would confront Hawthorne not just as individuals, but as a united front, standing against the oppressive darkness that sought to consume them. The battle for their land, for their lives, was just beginning. As night crept across the vast expanse of the west, the air grew thick with tension and unspoken fears. Caleb gathered the group in the dim light of the fire, their faces flickering with shadows. The elder spoke of past victories, of ancestors who fought for their land, and the stories wrapped around them like a warm blanket. But Caleb sensed the chill in the air, a reminder of the fight that lay ahead. "We cannot let fear bind us," the elder urged, his voice a low rumble echoing against the night. "Hawthorne's power stems from our silence. We must speak, we must act, and we must stand together." Caleb nodded, his thoughts racing. He felt the weight of every gaze upon him. The young ones, their eyes bright with determination, and the elders, whose faces bore the marks of countless struggles. He could not falter now. They were counting on him to lead them against the corruption that had plagued their lives for too long. "We'll need a plan," Caleb replied, a steely resolve forming in his chest. "Hawthorne thinks he can intimidate us, but he doesn't know the strength that lies within our unity. We must gather evidence of his deeds, find allies among those who still believe in justice." The flicker of the flames illuminated nods of agreement, and a sense of purpose surged through the group. They spent the night strategizing, voices hushed but filled with determination, each of them aware that the dawn might bring confrontation. But as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. Caleb and his allies moved swiftly, gathering the few who could be trusted in the nearby town. They approached the saloon, where men like Hawthorne often gathered, their laughter masking the greed that festered within. Little did they know Hawthorne was already plotting. Word had reached him of the gathering, and in his heart he felt the tendrils of fear begin to coil. The corrupt businessman knew that if he lost control of this situation, he could lose everything: his land, his power, and the secret dealings that lined his pockets. As Caleb stepped into the saloon, he noticed the hardened faces of those who had once feared to speak out. There was a murmur among the patrons, a ripple of uncertainty that flowed through the room as Caleb's presence challenged the status quo. He stepped forward, raising his voice above the din, calling for attention. "It's time to stand for what is right. We can no longer ignore the suffering we've allowed to fester in our community," he declared, his words ringing with a fierce conviction that silenced the room. "Hawthorne has taken too much from us, and we will not be complicit in his greed any longer. But just then the saloon doors swung open, and there stood Hawthorne, his presence commanding and filled with malice. "And what do you think you're doing, Caleb?" he sneered, his voice laced with arrogance. "You think your little speech is going to change anything? You're just a lone wolf howling in the wind." The tension surged, and Caleb felt the eyes of the townsfolk shift nervously between him and Hawthorne. But in that moment, a realization hit him. Hawthorne's bravado was a mask for the fear that lay beneath. The truth was, Caleb now held the power of knowledge of the corruption that had been hidden from the light. "Your time of intimidation is over, Hawthorne," Caleb shouted back, his voice steady. "We know of your dealings, and we won't let you destroy our lives any longer." The room held its breath as the confrontation unfolded. Hawthorne's face twisted in anger, revealing the cracks in his facade. As they locked eyes, Caleb felt the pulse of the community behind him, standing firm in the face of adversity. It was a moment of reckoning, and as Hawthorne's anger boiled over, Caleb knew he had to prepare for the truth to come to light. The battle was no longer just for their land. It was a fight for dignity, for justice, and for the very soul of the community. The dawn had arrived, and with it, the promise of a fight that would echo through the West for generations to come. Caleb stood tall, unwavering, as the townsfolk began to murmur, their resolve strengthening with each word he spoke. The bonds of shared struggle were forged anew in that moment, and the oppressive weight of Hawthorne's tyranny began to lift. "People of Silver Creek," Caleb called out, his voice ringing with conviction. "We've allowed fear to govern our lives for too long. Hawthorne's greed thrives on our silence, but no more. The truth is a powerful weapon, and together we will wield it." In the back of the room, a familiar face emerged, an elder from the native community who had once shared stories of their ancestors' struggles. With steady hands he stepped forward, raising a hand to silence the whispers. "We are not alone in this fight," he said, his voice resonating like thunder. "Caleb speaks the truth. The land belongs to all of us, and we must stand united against those who wish to divide us." The crowd erupted in support, their voices rising like a chorus of defiance against the storm. Hawthorne's bravado faltered, the cracks in his armor widening as the tide turned against him. The sheriff, having witnessed the strength of their unity, shifted his stance, realizing the true nature of law and order lay not in the barrel of a gun, but in the hearts of the people. With the elders' knowledge and Caleb's courage, they devised a plan to expose Hawthorne's conspiracy. Gathering evidence of his underhanded dealings with the railroad and the corrupt officials he had bribed, the truth flowed like a river, unstoppable and clear. As the sun set on Silver Creek, the town rallied together, confronting the corrupt man who had held them in chains for far too long. With each revelation, the truth cracked Hawthorne's facade, revealing the depths of his deceit. The people watched as he stumbled, unmasked, the weight of his lies crashing down around him. In a final confrontation, Caleb turned to Hawthorne, no longer a predator, but a cornered animal. "You thought you could sow division and reap fear," he said, "but you underestimated the strength of our unity. Justice will not be served with bullets, but with the unwavering will of those who dare to stand for what is right." With the evidence brought forth, the town demanded accountability. Hawthorne's reign of intimidation crumbled, and the corrupt lawmen who had stood by his side were exposed, stripped of their power in the light of truth. As the dust settled and the community breathed a collective sigh of relief, Caleb looked over the faces of those he had fought for, a sense of hope igniting within him. Justice had prevailed, not through violence, but through courage, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of truth. In the end, the Old West was not just a tale of gunfights and outlaws, but a testament to the strength found in unity and the power of a single voice to inspire change. Caleb understood that mercy is not a weakness, but a strength, and courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, a reminder of the countless stories etched in the sky, Caleb knew this was just the beginning. The battle for justice and dignity would continue, but now it would be fought together as one. And in that rugged land where the shadows of the past lingered, the echoes of hope would carry on, reminding all who listened that the heart of the West beats strongest in those who dare to stand for what is right. What would you do when faced with the choice between fear and courage?